work is titled Oje Market Day, and I got the fabrics from Oje Market and several other markets in Ibadan, Oronyo, Gbagi Market, and Ifu from Balogun Market. And it talks about the connections between local markets within Nigeria as well as international markets. As far back as 1891, the British exported British satin and cotton to Nigeria, and the British Colonial Assistant Secretary Alvan Milson saw the potentials in exporting materials to Nigeria because he saw that the average Yoruba person was very interested in fashion, was ashamed to appear in public without being very well dressed. And apart from dressing in some attire, they would hold ample cloth, a lot of fabrics alongside their clothing. And he thought that it would take about 40 yards of material to sew a man's garb and 30 yards for a female garb, and for a child about 6 yards. So if you put all that together, it amounted to a lot of fabrics. And so he spoke to the Manchester Chamber of Commerce to see the potentials of exporting material to Nigeria. And between 1895 and 1920, sales moved on from about £200,000 to about 6 million in 1920. The volume of trade in cotton to Nigeria was huge. So a number of farmers who had cocoa farms and kola nut farms deserted their farms and went into retail business. They were now selling fabrics, and they were also setting up tailoring outfits to mop up the demand for sewing Iro and Buba, Daishiki and Agbada. So in a sense, this truncated the very established tradition of cotton spinning, weaving on looms, and the making of indigenous fabrics like ashoke. So Oje Market is a very popular market. It was known as the international market for the sale of indigo in West Africa, and other West Africans from the coast, from Guinea, from Senegal and Gambia will come all the way down to Nigeria to buy, in fact to Ibadan, to buy indigo cloth. In Abeokuta, it was noted that about 2,000 indigo wrappers were sold to Senegalese traders on a single day. So that was the volume of trade. And it was also noticed that if you went into any market in Ibadan, particularly Oje Market, you find that the entire market appeared blue in color, and that, was a reference to the number of indigo wrappers that were available in the market and that were sold in the market alongside what the traders also wore. So Oje Market, the squares in this patchwork installation refer to the customers in the market on the market day. And Oje Market today in Ibadan, when you go there, you find quite a number of fabrics, particularly ashoke, at very affordable prices. You can also get vintage cloth brought from different parts of southwestern Nigeria to the market, which holds every 17 days. So in doing this work, I also looked at the color scheme. I bought quite a number of fabrics that were sold in this market and put them together so that you had this beautiful array of colors spread across the entire work. And in trying to locate Oje in Ibadan, I looked to J.P. Clark's poem, which was published in 1965, where he talked about the haphazard nature of the city of Ibadan in very flowery language. Running splash of rust and gold, flung and scattered among 7 hills like broken china in the sun. And so the browns, the yellow ochre, the burnt sienna, the rusty color of the cloth I used for depicting that segment of the work was a reference to J.P. Clark's poem titled Ibadan, which is a 5-line poem, but very popular. And Ibadan meant so much to J.P. Clark, and it also means a lot to me. So we move on to another part of the work, which shows bright colored fabrics, a variety of fabrics, including the black and white, which shows a lot of contrast. And it's also a reference to the fact that we, in Nigeria, Nigeria has become a dumping ground for several other countries where we export a lot of fabrics from China, from Dubai, from Turkey. And also shows that we've jettisoned our culture. We had a very strong tradition of cloth weaving as far back as the 9th century AD. Woven fabric was excavated along with the finds in Igbo in eastern Nigeria. 13th century, the Benin cloth was a highly prized indigenous cloth that was sought after by Europeans. And about that time, perhaps even before, Ashoke was woven. Sonyo, Etu, Alari, the prestige cloth of the Yoruba people, were made about that time. And so with that kind of rich tradition, it's very heartbreaking to see that Nigeria has become a dumping ground for many of these countries. We just send their fabrics down here. And so we haven't developed this tradition of that has been passed on to us for several centuries. So we move on to indigo. The work actually starts with indigo and ends with indigo. And so we're paying homage to those who have really pushed forward this tradition of dyeing, extracting dyes, and also celebrated the fabric as a form of identity. People like Akinwumi Ishola, Adebayo Faleti, Dike Davis Okundaye, who for many decades has been dyeing fabrics and also training a lot of people to see the beauty and in the art of dyeing fabrics. So in a sense, all the fabrics here, except for the ashoke that spots the installation, are made of cotton, and also shows that the artist who had developed this indigenous technology of weaving fabrics actually transferred their creative sensibilities into the new canvas, which was the cotton that was imported from Europe. The sewing machine indicates the new trades that evolved around the time when farmers began to sew, and they left their farms for that purpose. So everything that appears in this installation connects very strongly to the history of cloth during the colonial period and afterwards. Olumepe consists of about 96 plates, which are stencils cut from mild steel. The original stencils that were made were made of zinc sheets. They were cut from zinc sheets, and it marks the entry of males into this predominantly female art form. Women will paint using cassava starch. They will paint patterns on cloth. Using a feather, and this could take a very long time, like 2-3 weeks to make a wrapper. But the men felt that it was an easier way to use stencils to make more yards, more patterns on fabric, and in a sense mass produce these wrappers. And so they introduced the use of stencils and also the use of sewing machines to create a resist method on cloth. So Olumepe also functions as a piece in the exhibition, and also was used for a performance where 16 young men took each of the 6 stencils and displayed them for the audience to see, and in a sense celebrates the collective spirit of both male and female in the art of agrarian nature. Bringing in the sheaves, Another installation looks at, well, a very interesting chorus that talks about bringing in the sheaves, we shall come rejoicing. And I imagine that the artist, the Adire artist or the dyers will have been very excited about bringing in a new set of leaves from which to extract the dyes. And this work celebrates the art of extracting blue from green leaves, as well as the science of it. So the dyers understood the chemistry and the alchemy of these materials. They also understood the connections that existed between dyeing fabrics and also pottery. So they knew that the earthenware pots which held the dyes were porous to, the walls were porous to air, and that activated the bacterial formation within the dyes. And that gave the intensity of hue that was really appreciated on the cloth when it was dipped into the vats. In many ways, this also interfaces with the art of, or the science of soap making. The artists knew to create a kiln and fired a lot of cocoa pods and burnt them into ashes. And quite a number of vegetal matter were burnt, and these ashes were added to the dyes to serve as a lye, some kind of material to break down the insoluble dye known as emu. So much as it celebrates the art of painting and designing, it also celebrates the chemistry and of the extraction process, which was very well developed. So in the installation, we also have a huge gab, an agbada, which is etu, very prestigious cloth. And inside of the cloth, we have the commemorative cloth that was used to mark Nigerian independence in 1960. And quite a number of personal fabrics which exist in that installation. Fabrics that are bought from Ibadan market, from Oronya market and Oje market since 1989 when I moved into the city. As well as personal clothing which I wore during my engagements in 1994, and fabrics that were given to me by my grandmother-in-law and my mother-in-law 25 years ago. Much as this talks about my personal history, it also connects to the collective history, and people can connect with these fabrics because we all own these fabrics, and these fabrics actually capture historical time.
Come up on this guy, please. People wait, let me find not to pass it.
Stamping history looks at the processes of production and also the stencils that were used, the mundane tools that were used for creating patterns. And I argue that these stencils and templates hold the mark of the artist, and they also bear the designs that appear on cloth. And so they can be celebrated as they're as valid as the cloth that's being celebrated. So a broad range of designs that have been caught and used over the last 2 decades, which appear on Kampala. Some of the archetypal patterns of indigo also appear in this installation. But what's interesting here is that this range of foam stamps were carved by a Ghanaian who came into Nigeria in 1981, and he had always serviced the textile industry. And this goes to show that the person who actually produces the design on cloth may not necessarily be the one who created the pattern. And the owner or the person who creates the pattern or the stencil is never seen. It's the cloth that goes to the market. The stencils and the templates remain in the artist's atelier. So in many ways, I've tried to bring in this stencil and the templates, which are the positive or negative part of the designs, and install them as art forms. And there's a broad range of designs that caters for different generations. Much as we have the classical patterns of indigo, we also have some of the patterns which are from Adinkra, which come from outside of Nigeria, and also from Ghana, and also some of the emoticons and emojis which are part of popular culture, forming part of this installation. So it goes to say that this work has moved from being a strictly Yoruba idiom into something that's multicultural and also caters for several generations. Even Mother's wrapper couldn't cover. It's a work that is done in 3 pieces, and it looks at the wrapper as a metaphor for protection. When a child sleeps, the mother covers the child with a wrapper, and the hand as a symbol of indigo. The Yoruba people say "Owo bowo," and that talks about the hand supporting the hand, and refers to the collective nature of dyeing, weaving. We have people who tie the fabric, those who dye, those who beat the cloth, and those who also sell in the markets. So it refers to this very strongly, this kind of art where people work together. And the patterns of indigo appear on this cloth, which are spread across the entire work. And there's a doll or 2 dolls in that work, which shows that a child is looking in the corner. In many ways, the art of dyeing was done by women in their own home spaces, where they could keep an eye on their children and take care of the home. So we look at the wrapper in today's context, which can also be used to conceal bombs. So in a way, this work ties up with the political situation in Nigeria, in the northeastern part of Nigeria, where bombs go off and toys are dispersed, personal effects are dispersed, and the wrapper gets torn in the process. So the wrapper, which once protected, gets shredded, gets destroyed in the process of a bomb blast. And if you look closely at the toys that are dispersed, you find that these toys must have, been owned by a child from an elitist background, and so anyone could be caught in the crossfire. The poor, the rich, and in a sense, it talks about it becomes an art form that is beautiful, but also shows that, in some sense, art can also relay very painful messages. Soon Baby is a relief work that references the tradition of wearing beads around the waist. When women wear these beads, it's only their husbands that they have access to seeing the beads. And the beads are usually flat and round. And if you look in this work, most of the works have a circular form. But here, the circular form is used to represent the flat beads. And when you say Soon Baby, it means you are asking that the beads be moved up. And when you move up the beads, it reveals something underneath. Body blue refers to the cloth that is dyed, and in the process of dyeing the cloth, the hands also get dyed. And you find the typical Yalaro, our hands are always dyed with blue. So the cloth gets dyed and the hands also get dyed. So we find that there are several hands in this composition, which also refers to the dissemination of knowledge, where a woman passes on the skills of dyeing to her daughter. It also refers to the fact that when you wear indigo blue, some of the color comes on your underpants or stains your body, and it's in a way calling for more attention to be paid to the process of refining the dye so that it becomes fast. Asho Ibura means the cloth that's used to cover, a coverlet, and it has quite a number of designs. If a particular motif is replicated, repeated in some format, it looks like a textile pattern. So any pattern can be used for textile. So we have a broad range of designs that are not just from the classical indigo designs, but drawn from social media, emoticons, emojis that appear and are repeated across the entire surface of the work to give you a pattern that appears like a textile fabric that that is very functional.